The desert wind carried secrets that night. Whispers of a man who'd forgotten how to live and a woman who refused to forget how to fight. Jake Hollister had been running for 3 years. Not from the law, though he'd given them reason enough. Not from enemies, though he'd made plenty. He was running from the ghost of the boy he used to be. The one who believed in something bigger than survival. That ghost had died the same day as his brother. Cut down by raiders while Jake was 20 miles away, drinking whiskey and playing cards in a Santa Fe saloon. Now, as his horse picked its way through the rocky badlands of New Mexico territory, Jake wondered if a man could run far enough to outpace his own shadow. The sun was setting like a wound across the horizon, bleeding orange and crimson into the darkening sky. His canteen was near empty, his provisions down to hardtack and jerky. And somewhere behind him, the Dawson gang was tracking the man who'd stolen their payroll. He hadn't meant to be a thief. The money was supposed to go to the Apache reservation, compensation for land stolen and promises broken. But Clayton Dawson and his boys had other plans. And when Jake stumbled onto their camp that morning, curiosity had gotten the better of his judgment. The saddlebags were right there, unguarded while the gang slept off their whiskey. He'd taken them without thinking, driven by some half-formed notion of making things right. Now he had 6 killers on his trail and nowhere to go but deeper into Apache territory. The horse stumbled and Jake pulled up, scanning the landscape. That's when he saw the smoke, just a thin ribbon rising from behind a cluster of red rocks about a mile northeast. Could be travelers, could be a trap, could be his only chance at water before his mount gave out completely. He urged the horse forward, hand resting on his pistol. As he rounded the rocks, Jake's breath caught. A woman stood beside a small fire, her back to him, long black hair cascading down to her waist. She wore a buckskin dress adorned with intricate beadwork, and even from a distance, he could see the proud set of her shoulders. An Apache woman, alone in the wilderness. She turned before he could announce himself, and Jake found himself staring into the darkest, most defiant eyes he'd ever seen. "You can leave now, white man, or you can water your horse and be gone before the moon rises. Choose quickly." Jake dismounted slowly, hands visible. "Name's Jake Hollister, ma'am. I mean no harm, just looking for..." "Everyone who comes to the desert is looking for something. Most don't find what they seek. The spring is there." She pointed to a cleft in the rocks. "Take what you need and go." He should have listened, should have filled his canteen, watered his horse, and ridden into the night. But something in her voice, in the way she held herself like a drawn bow, made him pause. "You out here alone?" The question came out rougher than he intended. Her laugh was bitter. "I'm alone everywhere, whether there are people around me or not. My father was Apache. My mother was Mexican. The Apaches say I'm too light. The Mexicans say I'm too dark. The white settlers just say I should disappear. So I disappeared. Better to be alone by choice than alone in a crowd." Jake led his horse to the spring, his mind working. A woman alone out here wouldn't last long, no matter how tough she talked. And those eyes, there was pain there, deep as canyon walls. "Got a name?" he asked as he filled his canteen. "Rosa." She didn't offer more. "Rosa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer straight. You know these lands? Better than I know myself. There's a place nearby where a man could hide, somewhere the Dawson gang wouldn't think to look." Her head snapped up. "You running from Dawson's men?" Jake nodded. "Took something that belongs to someone else. Thought I was doing right, but..." Shrugged. "Story of my life, I suppose." Rosa studied him for a long moment, and Jake felt like she was reading every mistake he'd ever made, every wrong turn, every cowardly choice. Finally she spoke. "There's a box canyon about 2 hours north. Hidden entrance, good water, grass for your horse. Dawson's men won't find it unless someone shows them. But there's a price. Name it. Take me with you. Past the canyon,
past the territory, past everything I've ever known. I want to see the ocean. I want to stand where the land ends and know I've gone as far as anyone can go. Jake's first instinct was to refuse. A woman would slow him down, make him vulnerable, complicate everything. But as he looked at Rosa, standing there in the dying light with nothing but a fire in her pride, he saw something he recognized. She wasn't asking to be rescued. She was asking for partnership, for a chance to choose her own path instead of accepting the one others had laid out for her. "All right," he said, "but when Dawson catches up, and he will, you do exactly what I say. No arguments." She smiled, and it transformed her face. "We'll see about that." They rode through the night, Rosa behind him on the horse, her arms wrapped around his waist. She guided him with whispered directions, through passes he'd never found alone, around obstacles invisible in the darkness. The woman knew this land like she'd been born from its red soil. Just before dawn, they reached the canyon. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for a horse, hidden behind a fallen boulder that looked like solid rock until you were right on top of it. Inside, the canyon opened up into a perfect sanctuary. Walls rose 100 feet on all sides. A spring bubbled up from the ground, and scrub grass grew thick enough to feed the horse for days. "My grandfather showed me this place," Rosa said, as Jake unsaddled the horse. "Said it was where Apache warriors came when they needed to remember who they were. When the world got too loud, too confusing. I've been living here 3 months, gathering enough courage to leave." Jake built a fire while Rosa produced a rabbit from somewhere, already cleaned and ready to cook. They worked in comfortable silence, and for the first time in years, Jake felt something like peace settling over him. "What'd you steal?" Rosa asked as they ate. Jake told her about the payroll, about the reservation, about his half-formed plan to make up for all the times he'd looked away when he should have stood up. He told her about his brother, about the guilt that ate at him like acid, about the 3 years of drifting from town to town, never staying, never connecting, never being anything more than a ghost passing through. Rosa listened without judgment, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "My mother died when I was 12. Cholera. My father tried to raise me Apache, but I looked too much like her. Every time he saw me, he saw her death. So he sent me to the mission school in Santa Fe. The priests tried to beat the Apache out of me, literally." She touched a scar on her wrist. "When I was 16, I ran. Been running ever since, from the reservation, from the mission, from every man who thought a woman alone was an invitation. Until now. Now I'm done running. I'm running towards something instead. The ocean. The ocean and whatever comes after." They slept in shifts, Rosa first, while Jake kept watch from the canyon rim. Around mid-morning, he spotted dust on the horizon. Riders, at least 5, moving in a search pattern. The Dawson gang, spreading out, checking every draw and gulch. He slipped back down to wake Rosa, but she was already up, packing supplies into a worn leather bag. "Saw them from here," she said, pointing to a crack in the rocks. "They'll work this area for another day, maybe 2. Then they'll move on or give up. Dawson doesn't give up. Then we wait 'em out and leave at night. Head west instead of north. They'll expect you to run for California or Colorado. We go towards Arizona territory, cut south to Mexico, then west to the Sea of Cortez. It's not the Pacific, but it's still an ocean." Jake should have argued, should have insisted on his own plan, but Rosa's confidence was infectious, and he was tired of making decisions that led nowhere good.
"You really thought this through," he said. "I've had 3 months with nothing but time in this canyon. I've planned 100 different escapes." She smiled, that transforming smile again. "You just gave me a reason to pick one and commit." The day crawled by with the weight of waiting. They talked in low voices, sharing stories like children trading treasures. Rosa told him about learning to track from her grandfather, about the old man's hands gnarled as tree roots, pointing out signs Jake would never see, about her mother's voice singing Spanish lullabies that made the stars seem closer, about feeling like two people trapped in one body, never quite whole in any world. Jake told her about his brother's laugh, about the ranch they'd planned to buy together, about the moment he'd ridden back to find the house burned and Charlie buried in a shallow grave by neighbors who pitied but didn't care enough to investigate, about the bottle that became his only friend and the fights that became his only prayer. "Why'd you take the payroll?" Rosa asked as afternoon shadows grew long. "Really?" Jake was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Because I'm tired of being the man who does nothing. Charlie always said we had a responsibility, those of us with means and strength. Said sitting by while others suffered made us guilty as the ones doing the harm." He picked up a stone, turned it over in his hands. "Guess I figured if I couldn't save my brother, maybe I could save someone else's. Stupid, probably." "No," Rosa said softly. "Not stupid. Late, maybe, but not stupid." That night, as the moon rose fat and silver over the canyon walls, Rosa came to sit beside Jake at the fire. The air had turned cold, and she wrapped a blanket around both their shoulders. "You know they might catch us. Dawson might not give up. We might not make it to Mexico, let alone the ocean." "I know." "And you're still willing to try?" Jake looked at her, really looked at her, at the strength in her jaw, the scars on her hands that told of survival, the hope in her eyes that she tried so hard to hide. When had he ever last felt hope? When had he ever last believed tomorrow might be better than today? "Yeah," he said, "I'm willing to try." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and Jake felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been frozen for 3 years. It hurt, that thawing, but it was a good hurt, the hurt that meant healing might be possible. "When we get to the ocean," Rosa whispered, "I'm going to walk into the water until it covers my shoulders. I'm going to let the waves knock me down and lift me up. I'm going to taste the salt and know I'm somewhere my father never went, somewhere the priests never reached, somewhere I chose for myself." "When we get to the ocean," Jake replied, "I'm going to write Charlie a letter. Tell him about meeting you, about the canyon, about finally doing something that matters. Then I'm going to burn it and let the ashes blow out to sea." Sounds like a good plan. They sat like that until the fire burned low, neither wanting to move, neither wanting to break the spell of shared vulnerability. The next morning brought danger. Jake woke to Rosa's hand on his mouth, her eyes urgent. He heard it then, voices echoing off the canyon walls. The Dawson gang had found the entrance. "Tracks lead in here, fresh, maybe 12 hours old." That was Clayton Dawson's voice, rough as gravel. "We got him trapped, boys. Spread out and move slow. He's got nowhere to run." Rosa pointed up, to a narrow chimney in the rock face Jake hadn't noticed before. She mimed climbing, then pointed to herself and Jake, then to the top of the canyon. He shook his head, but she was already moving, quick and quiet as shadow. They climbed like their lives depended on it, because they did. The rock was sharp enough to cut hands, the holds barely wide enough for fingers. Below, Jake heard men entering the canyon, heard their horses nickering, heard Clayton Dawson calling out, "Hollister, I know you're in here. Give up the money and we'll make it quick. Keep hiding and we'll make you wish you died years ago." Jake's hand slipped, and for a terrifying moment he dangled by one arm, rocks clattering down. Below, someone shouted, gunfire cracked, bullets sparking off stone. Then Rosa's hand was on his wrist, impossibly strong, pulling him up. They scrambled over the rim as more shots echoed behind them. The horse, Jake thought desperately. They'd left the horse in the canyon. But Rosa was already running, and Jake followed, trusting her instincts. They crossed a flat stretch of rock that would show no tracks, then down into another system of canyons, these ones tighter, more labyrinthine. Behind them, men shouted and swore, trying to find the path.
They ran for an hour, maybe more, until Jake's lungs burned and his legs threatened to give out. Finally, Rosa pulled him into a cave barely big enough for both of them. They pressed against the back wall, breathing hard, listening. The sounds of pursuit faded. Either the gang had lost the trail, or they'd given up the chase as too dangerous. Jake slumped against the rock, the reality of their situation crushing down. No horse, no food, no water except what was in his canteen. They were on foot in the desert with killers behind them. "There's a trading post," Rosa gasped out between breaths. 2 days walk west. We can get horses there. My grandfather traded there for years. The owner, Chen, he'll help us." 2 days in the open, Rosa. We'll cook. Then we walk at night and rest during the day. It's what the Apache do. It's what smart people do. She met his eyes. "You want to go back? Face Dawson?" He thought about it. Really thought about it. 3 years ago, he'd have turned himself in. Would have figured he deserved whatever came. But something had changed in that canyon, in those hours of talking and listening and hoping. He'd remembered what it felt like to have something worth fighting for. "No," he said. "I want to see you walk into that ocean." Her smile came like sunrise. They walked through 2 of the hardest nights of Jake's life. The desert revealed itself in ways he'd never imagined, alive with sounds and movements. Rosa taught him to read the stars, to find water by watching birds at dusk, to move across rocky ground without leaving sign. She told him stories her grandfather had told her about Coyote, the trickster, and how the mountains came to be. On the second night, they heard riders in the distance, the Dawson gang, still hunting. Jake wanted to hide, but Rosa shook her head. "We keep moving. Stopping gets you killed. Movement is life." Just before dawn on the 3rd day, they stumbled into Chen's trading post, a ramshackle collection of buildings that looked like the wind might blow them away. Chen himself was ancient, with a face like weathered leather and eyes that missed nothing. He took one look at Rosa and smiled. "Little bird, your grandfather said you'd come someday." "He told you that?" "He told me many things before he walked on. Said you were meant for far places, big waters. Said a man would come who needed saving as much as you did." Chen shifted his eyes to Jake. "You him?" Jake didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. "Good. Your horses are ready. Food, water, everything you need. Payment's already made." "What?" Rosa's voice cracked. "How?" "Your grandfather traded 20 years of furs, leatherwork, and knowledge for a debt to be paid when you needed it. Today is that day." Cheng pressed a folded paper into Rosa's hand. "He wrote this before he died, said you'd know when to read it." They rode out an hour later on strong horses with full packs, following a route that Cheng had mapped out that would take them south through backcountry no one patrolled. Jake felt like he'd stepped into a story someone else had written, where the impossible kept becoming possible. That night, by their campfire, Rosa unfolded her grandfather's letter. Her hands shook as she read, and tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. Finally, she looked up at Jake. "He says I should trust the white man with the wounded eyes and the brave heart. Says he saw me in a dream, standing by an ocean with a man who'd learned to stop running. Says, I was always meant to be free, and he's sorry he couldn't give me that himself." Jake moved to sit beside her, and Rosa leaned into him, letting the tears come. He held her while she cried for the grandfather who loved her enough to set her free, for the father who couldn't, for all the years of not belonging.
When the tears stopped, she looked up at the stars. "Tell me about the ranch you and your brother wanted to buy." So Jake did. He described the valley they'd found in Colorado, with water year-round and grass for cattle. The house they'd sketched out on paper, nothing fancy, just solid and warm. The life they'd imagined, honest work and honest pay, maybe families someday. Definitely a future worth waking up for. "Could we still do it?" Rosa asked. "After the ocean, could we go there, see if it's still available?" The question hit Jake like a flash flood, unexpected and overwhelming. Could they? Could he take the step from running to building, from surviving to living? Could he trust that this woman, with her fierce independence and wounded heart, might want to build something with him? The payroll money, he said slowly. It was meant for the Apache. But if I turned it in, explained what happened, maybe you could buy that ranch. We could buy it, together. Rosa's hand found his. I'm tired of being alone, Jake. I'm tired of running and hiding and pretending I don't need anyone. I want what you and your brother dreamed about. I want a place that's mine, ours, where nobody can tell me I don't belong. He turned to face her fully. I'm a mess, Rosa. I'm a drunk who's trying not to be. I'm a coward who's trying to be brave. I'm a thief who thinks he was doing right, but probably just made things worse. And I'm a woman nobody wants, from people who don't claim me, with nothing to offer but stubbornness and survival skills. She squeezed his hand. Sounds like we're perfectly matched. He kissed her then, gentle and tentative, like someone handling something precious that might break. She kissed him back with a fierceness that said she was stronger than he feared, that she wouldn't break, that she was choosing this as much as he was. When they pulled apart, Jake was grinning like a fool. When we get to the ocean, after you've walked in the water and I've burned my letter, let's go see about a ranch. Let's find that valley and make something good, something Charlie would have been proud of. And something my grandfather dreamed about, Rosa added. They reached the Sea of Cortez 6 weeks later, having outrun the Dawson gang and turned the payroll over to a federal marshal who'd actually listened to Jake's story. There would be a hearing, probably a fine, possibly jail time. But the marshal had been impressed by Jake's honesty and by his willingness to face consequences instead of running. Man takes responsibility for his mistakes. That's a man trying to be better. I'll speak for you. Now standing on a beach with sand like powdered gold, Jake watched Rosa wade into the waves. She'd stripped down to her shift, not caring who saw, and the water rose around her like welcome. She laughed when a wave knocked her down, came up sputtering and radiant, and Jake felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like home. He pulled out the letter he had written to Charlie, pages filled with stories of canyons and courage, of a woman who taught him that running towards something was braver than running away. He struck a match, held it to a corner, and watched the paper curl and blacken. The wind caught the ashes and carried them out over the water, and Jake felt the weight he'd been carrying for 3 years finally lift. Rosa splashed back to shore, dripping and grinning. Your turn, go on. Jake waded in, and the water was cold and perfect. He let a wave hit him, tasted salt, felt the pull of something bigger than himself. When he turned back, Rosa was standing on the beach, silhouetted against the setting sun, and she looked like every answer to every question he had never known how to ask. They dried off by a driftwood fire as stars emerged overhead. Tomorrow, they'd start the journey to Colorado, to that valley and that dream. Tomorrow they'd begin building instead of running. But tonight they sat together on the edge of the continent, two people who'd been lost, finding themselves found. Jake took Rosa's hand, and she laced her fingers through his. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For seeing something in me worth saving. For not giving up when any sensible person would have. For walking into that ocean and making me believe impossible things can happen. Rosa leaned her head on his shoulder, just like that night in the canyon. Thank you for being the man my grandfather dreamed about, for being brave enough to choose something different, for taking me with you. They sat like that until the fire burned to embers, two survivors becoming partners, two runners finding a reason to stop. The ocean breathed in and out like a living thing, and somewhere in the darkness, the future waited with all its possibilities. When they finally lay down to sleep, wrapped in blankets under the stars, Rosa whispered one more thing. Tomorrow we ride towards something better. Tonight we rest, and that's enough. Jake pulled her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest, and knew she was right. It was enough. They were enough. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The desert had taught them how to survive, but the ocean, vast and endless, was teaching them how to live.